Good morning, folks. Hope everyone's keeping well. Considering the weather we had last week, it's not as nice this week. So last week we had temperatures 24, 26 degrees most days, and I happened to be involved in the Famine Trail walk, veterans walking for veterans. So there were veterans and active service personnel from the Irish Defence Forces walking the Famine Trail. And that Famine Trail is from Strokestown, County Roscommon, all the way up along the canal to Dublin Docklands, to the Famine Memorial there. And it's along a trail pretty much along the canal, but it's a horrific story going back to the famine and where the landlord, the Lord of Strokestown, decided it would be more economical for him to ship everyone off to Canada than it was for him to either feed them or put them into the workhouses. So the economics of it were that it would cost him £11,000 to feed them or put them through the workhouse system, as opposed to 5,000 to ship them all to Canada. It's 227 families, making up 1,490 people, men, women, and lots of children. And it was a fairly horrific story whereby only approximately a third of those who started the trek made it to a life in Canada. Whether they died on the journey to Dublin, whether they died in quarantine in Liverpool. So they went from Dublin, Strokestown, they walked from Strokestown to Dublin, got a ship over to Liverpool, were quarantined in Liverpool, and then were shipped on the coffin ships, which were not designed for human transport, they were designed for livestock transport, shipped from Liverpool to Canada, where they had to go through quarantine, 2-week quarantine again over there. And what happens is when you get to quarantine, anyone who is sick and anyone who is not sick are all quarantined together. So if you weren't sick to start with, chances are you caught something there. So less than a third survived, and eventually, it took 2 to 3 years, but eventually word got back to Ireland of how many did not make it. And the landlord of Strokestown House was the first famine-era landlord to be assassinated in Ireland. So, yeah, it's a horrific story of families. There was one family, the Tighe family. The husband had died from the famine. The woman and her 5 children made the trek, were shipped off to Canada. Only 2 made it all the way. and they were taken in by a priest in Quebec, and a farmer came along, saw them and said, look, the boy is 12, he can work on the farm, I'll take the boy. And the sister clung on to him and said, no, I'm not going anywhere without him, and he's not going anywhere without me. So the farmer eventually decided he'd take the two of them. She died in her 30s, and he went on. Farmer and wife never had any children of their own, so he actually went on to inherit the farm after their death, and his family and his generations survived. But the story of the actual Famine Trail itself is, horrific, to say the very least. So they were walked by their bailiffs along the canal to Dublin. No food, no drink, no anything. They slept at the side of the canal, and they walked 168 kilometers was the official distance then, which is 106 miles, give or take. They walked that in 6 days. And a lot of the children were given leather shoes. Most of these children had never worn shoes, had never seen shoes before in their lives. They were given shoes. One size of shoe. And if your feet were too small, your feet were bound with leather to bulk up your foot so that it would fit into the shoe. So that must have been horrific and painful. And what was even more horrific, which is not as commonly known, but Ireland in general was not in a famine. It was only the potato crop that failed. So while these people were walked along the canal was the main artery of transport for everything. And many of the barges passing by them were laden with food, being shipped to the UK for sale, and shipped to Dublin for sale. So while the family starved, there was food, and lots of it. In fact, it was a bumper crop for many crops that year. But the blight had taken the potatoes, and the potato was primarily what was left over, what was easy to grow for the average person. So that's all they had, was the potato crop. So many people, when they got to Dublin, had a lot of green around their mouth from eating grass and whatever they could find at the side of the canals. Absolutely horrific. And that's one of the main reasons to this day why there is massive resentment by the Irish against the British who ruled the country at the time. Most of the landlords were British or of British descent and had their allegiance to the crown rather than to the Irish people. So we walked this trail in, I'm going to say, relative comfort. Modern shoes, regular stops for food, water. Now, we did have an unseasonably hot week to walk it in. So our biggest issue was blisters, sunburn, sunstroke. But these families had nothing, absolutely nothing. They had what they were carrying, and that was all they had. And more often than that, that was maybe one change of clothes. one little memento or keepsake from home, and nothing else. So it was very humbling to be part of that experience and part of that walk. Um, Now I will put my hand up and fully admit I did not walk the full distance. I did suffer from blisters, and I ended up taking the van a lot of the days, and my other role on the track was to take photographs to document our trek. So I did that, and I put together a little slideshow and put some music to it. When we got into Dublin at the end of it all, we were piped in by a piper, and the Lord Mayor of Dublin came to meet us and greet us and speak about what we had done and what those poor families had to go through to do a similar trek. So that was last week. Now, it was also great fun, a great laugh, walking with a great bunch of people, between active service military personnel, retired military personnel, be it the civil defence, the Irish Civil Defence, where our transport and support provided an excellent service to us. We stayed in costume barracks at Athlone for the first few nights, and then we came back to Dublin area and we stayed in Baldonnel Aerodrome, Casement Aerodrome, Baldonnel. So we had beds every night, food every night, and it was weird being back on military time. So you get up at 6:30 every morning, breakfast 7:30 every morning. We were on our transports by approximately 8:15 every morning, and then we started our walk at between 9 and 9:30, depending on the distance we had to travel to get to our start point. We were picked up between 3 and 4 p.m. each day at our end point and transported back to the barracks, where we would have dinner at 5 p.m. And that was our day. Most of us were in bed by 10:30, lights at 11, and slept like logs. So, yeah, in many ways it was an enjoyable week. In many ways it was a painful week. And I will admit that the very end was emotional, especially learning the story along the way. So, that was my last week. Now, when we got back to Baldonnel, there was a slight hiccup in the quarter arrangements. We were given a single billet of 14 beds. There turned out to be 4 active service personnel in some of those beds. So we were like, we're short beds. We're 14 walkers. So some of us elected to go home. I only live half an hour from the barracks, so it was an easy choice for me to go home. One of the other lads is a very similar distance, and he decided to do the same. So he gave me a lift home the first day, and I took the bike in and out for the rest of the week. And then on the final evening we came back to the barracks for some food, and then we went to the NCO's mess for a social calm down drink, and we were presented with our little certificates of achievement and absolutely stunning medals. The medals were designed by one of the walking team, Ken Cleary, and they are just beautiful. It symbolizes what we are, who we are, and what we're about. So that was my week last week, folks. This way. So hopefully everyone out there is keeping well. It's starting raining now, which is miserable. We had no rain last week. We had an absolutely beautiful week. No rain, not a drop. But the sunburn was the hardest part of last week. And it wasn't too bad. I was lathering on the sun cream every day. And yeah, I survived the sun. Survived a lot of the walk. And I got the photos done, which was the main thing. And I enjoyed it. Would I do it again? Yeah, I would. Next time I'll make sure I'm a hell of a lot fitter and a hell of a lot better prepared for the walk. I wasn't as prepared as I really should have been. I hadn't put in enough effort in advance. And I was just amazed at, one example was how much your feet swell on such a walk. So when I came back, I had hiking shoes, which were good. But when I try and put on my normal runners or evening footwear, they wouldn't fit. My feet would not go in because my feet had expanded so much during the walk, and everyone was saying that. Lads, for the dinner on the Friday evening, or Sunday evening, sorry, couldn't put his dress shoes on. And he said, yeah, fuck that, I can't put my shoes on, I'm not wearing my uniform, so we'll just go in t-shirt and trousers, the relaxed atmosphere. So, yeah, it was some experience. So I'll stick a link to the video in here if anyone wants to watch. So I'm back to getting out on the bike now, trying to clear the head, freshen up. Back to work as normal this week. I'm thankful I work from home so I can just put my feet up and relax and everything get back to normal. Anyway, that's me for now. Hope everyone's keeping well out there. Take care of yourselves, bike safe, and I'll talk soon.